Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Kane, thank you both for being here today. Mr. Secretary, your testimony over the last several days before Congress, I've heard you speak about all of your supposed accomplishments from your time at the Pentagon. I have to say, your training at Fox News has let you spin months of dangerous dysfunction and incompetence into catchy phrases like restoring the warrior ethos and increasing lethality. But the truth is, it's really been chaos at the Pentagon under your leadership. You've clearly shown you're unable to manage the Department of Defense, but what I'm most concerned about are three specific areas: your operational incompetence, your managerial incompetence, and your budgetary incompetence. So let's start with operational. According to news reports, in your first week on the job, you got confused in a National Security Council meeting and thought President Trump wanted you to stop all aid to Ukraine. In a well-functioning...
This decision to turn around aid already in trance, it had multiple layers of consequence. From a logistical standpoint, it caused millions of dollars in losses. Equipment already en route had to be recalled, reassessed, and stored, all of which comes with significant operational costs. Even more troubling, this decision left Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield without essential resources they had been counting on. In a conflict zone where timing and preparedness can mean the difference between life and death, this failure could have cost human lives and certainly undermined confidence in the reliability of U.S. support. What's particularly alarming is that this error wasn't owned or clarified afterward. When confronted with the consequences of his actions, the Secretary refused to acknowledge any mistake. Instead, he labeled the media coverage as fake news and deflected responsibility. This pattern of denial only further compounds the original issue because it suggests a systemic unwillingness to admit fault, learn from errors, or implement safeguards to prevent similar issues in the future. It also raises serious questions about internal communication and decision-making protocols within the Department of Defense. Moreover, the timeline tells its own story. Just days after the aid was halted, it resumed, suggesting that someone somewhere realized the mistake and corrected it. But the damage had already been done. Not only had the U.S. embarrassed itself on the global stage by appearing indecisive in its foreign policy, but the troops in Ukraine had been left in a vulnerable position. The incident reflects not just a one-time lapse in judgment, but a broader issue of operational competence.
In a well-functioning administration, you would have asked for clarification before making that seismic policy shift, but instead you ordered vital military aid heading to the front lines turned around, costing the U.S. millions of dollars, and depriving Ukrainian soldiers of equipment they needed to fight Russia. So, Mr. Secretary, can you explain how exactly you misunderstood such a monumental presidential order?
One of many fake news headlines we've dealt with.
So President Trump told you to halt military aid to Ukraine on January 30th?
As is often the case, highly ideological and very ill-informed reporters love to speculate about things they know nothing about in order to spear President Trump and myself.
So it sounds like actually the reporting is correct, because I will say, if it wasn't a mistake, why did aid restart only a few days later?
The second major concern surrounding the Secretary's tenure involves his abrupt and controversial firing of two high-ranking military leaders, General C.Q. Brown, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Admiral Lisa Franchetti, Chief of Naval Operations. These dismissals occurred less than a month into his appointment and were done without any publicly provided justification. The sudden nature of these terminations raised widespread alarm across military and political circles, especially since no clear reason has ever been presented. What makes this issue even more troubling is the speculation surrounding the motives behind these decisions. Many believe General Brown was removed due to his race and Admiral Franchetti because of her gender, an implication that, if true, would mark a deeply disturbing abuse of authority and reflect discriminatory bias at the highest levels of the Department of Defense. These leaders were not only removed without cause, but also without any plans for their immediate replacement. As of now, there is still no formal nomination submitted for a new Chief of Naval Operations. This delay in filling such a critical position has significant implications for military readiness, strategic continuity, and morale within the armed forces. Reports have indicated that the Secretary is struggling to find a replacement because qualified admirals are actively declining the position, allegedly due to their unwillingness to work under his leadership. If true, this reflects a profound breakdown in trust between the military's top brass and civilian leadership. When questioned during a congressional hearing, the Secretary failed to offer a satisfactory explanation for these decisions. His responses were vague and dismissive, offering phrases like "in due time" and "for all the right reasons," while refusing to directly address the motivations behind the firings or the delay in nominations. Instead of engaging in meaningful dialogue, he deflected questions and suggested that lawmakers shouldn't believe every headline they read. This level of evasiveness only fuels suspicions and undermines confidence in his leadership. The removal of senior leaders without proper explanation and the refusal to promptly replace them can have cascading effects across the military structure. It leaves service members uncertain about the direction of their commands, weakens strategic planning, and can slow or even stall critical defense initiatives. The military relies heavily on stable, competent leadership at the top to carry out complex missions around the world. When those positions are destabilized, especially without a clear rationale, the entire system is placed at risk.
Okay, let's move on to budgetary incompetence. You missed the deadline to submit a draft defense budget to Congress, which makes it impossible for us to complete our work on the NDAA or appropriations, and makes it more likely you'll receive delays in funding you need for new acquisitions, programs, and other priorities. Additionally, you're blowing money on poorly conceived operations and vanity projects for President Trump. Retrofitting the Qatari jet to serve as Air Force One will cost about $400 million. The
most alarming issue under the Secretary's leadership is his evident budgetary mismanagement, which has resulted in missed deadlines, wasted taxpayer money, and reckless spending on unnecessary or politically driven projects. One of the earliest signs of this dysfunction came when the Pentagon failed to meet its deadline for submitting a draft defense budget to Congress. This seemingly administrative misstep had major ripple effects. Without the budget, Congress was unable to begin timely work on the National Defense Authorization Act (NDAA) and appropriations processes. This delay increased the risk of funding gaps, disrupted long-term planning, and hindered the flow of money toward critical national defense programs, including acquisitions, training, and readiness initiatives. Instead of focusing on efficiency and strategy, the Secretary has allowed spending to balloon in ways that many believe are politically motivated or purely symbolic. For example, he approved the retrofitting of a Qatari jet to be used as a new version of Air Force One, a project with a staggering cost of approximately $400 million. This expense was deemed unnecessary by several experts, given that the current aircraft still meets operational standards and could have remained in service with minimal upgrades. Additionally, a military parade held in Washington, D.C. was estimated to cost over $40 million, raising eyebrows across the political spectrum. Critics saw the parade as an ego-driven vanity project with no measurable benefit to military morale or public engagement, especially considering the pressing needs across other defense priorities. Even more controversial was the $1 billion bombing campaign in Yemen, which, according to experts, yielded limited results. Just a week after the campaign, missile strikes erupted in Israel, suggesting that the military actions had not achieved long-term stability or deterrence. Such operations, while appearing bold in the short term, offer questionable strategic value if they fail to produce lasting results or disrupt enemy capabilities. Further, the decision to initiate high-cost military operations in Los Angeles raised concerns about the domestic use of military force and its accompanying financial burden, which ran into the tens of millions of dollars. The rationale behind this deployment was vague, and its results remain unclear, leaving observers to question whether the action served any real defense purpose or simply added to the growing list of imprudent expenditures. When pressed by Congress about which priorities had been sacrificed to fund these costly endeavors, the Secretary was unable or unwilling to provide specific answers. His response was evasive, offering only general statements about making trade-offs, and pointing vaguely to border security as an area of focus. This lack of transparency raises concerns about how budget decisions are being made and whether they align with the nation's most urgent security needs. Responsible budgeting is not just about avoiding waste, it's about ensuring every dollar spent advances the strategic interests of the country. Under this secretary's watch, the Pentagon has drifted far from that principle. At a time when global threats are intensifying and allies are depending on consistent U.S. leadership, such fiscal recklessness poses a serious threat to national security and public trust.
The parade in D.C. this weekend will cost upwards of $40 million. Your bombing campaign in Yemen cost about $1 billion, and a week later they were having missile strikes in Israel. Your operations in L.A. will cost tens of millions of dollars, and you claim to be cutting costs at the Pentagon, but all I see are wasted dollars better spent addressing our most pressing threats like China. So, Mr. Secretary, what priorities have you cut funding for to pay for these projects?
Ma'am, I would just say your list left off securing the southern border.
So, Mr. Secretary, what priorities have you cut funding for to pay for these projects?
We make trade-offs every day, and I would imagine what we want to spend on is quite different than what the previous administration did.
Well, I think the American
those changes quickly, and they're reflected in this budget, and we're very proud of them.
I think the American people can see why I'm so concerned about this incompetence. Thank you, and I yield back.